There's a lot of interest for AI within a healthcare system. We want to make sure patient safety is on the top of that list. What Leapfrog has done started the patient safety movement on a national level, which sort of changed the way the national conversation was going around patient safety. This really kickstarted it. In particular, looked at medication errors. They're the most common errors made in hospitals by far. Estimates are as much as one error per inpatient per day. So that's a lot. So if we can improve the way hospitals are getting feedback and accountability, then I think we will have more of an impetus for leaders in healthcare to deploy AI to make that an easier, more efficient way of discovering where the root of the problem is.
Welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience, brought to you by Taylor Healthcare. Subscribe now and stay on the forefront of the digital healthcare revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Healthcare Experience podcast presented by Taylor Healthcare. I'm your host, Chris Civitarese, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Leah Binder, President and CEO of the Leapfrog Group, which represents the interests of employers and other purchasers of healthcare calling for improved patient safety and quality in hospitals. Leapfrog publishes free ratings of hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers regarding how safe they are for their patients. Under her leadership, the Leapfrog Group has grown fourfold in size and launched major new initiatives, including the Leapfrog Hospital Safety Grade. Leah has served on numerous national boards and councils, is a regular contributor to outlets like Forbes.com, and has been consistently named to Modern Healthcare's annual list of the 100 most influential people in healthcare. Welcome, Leah. It is great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And today we're going to be talking about what I'll refer to as the intersection of health IT and patient safety. And certainly we'll get into the impact that AI is having on this space as well. And of course, the Leapfrog Group has been a leader in patient safety for over 2 decades. So Leah, I'm hoping you can just get us started by sharing a little bit about your background and how Leapfrog's work helps shape the national conversation around patient safety, specifically around healthcare technology.
Sure. Well, Leapfrog has been around for 25 years. In fact, that is what we're celebrating this year, our 25th anniversary. It came out of a report that was done by what was then called the Institute of Medicine. Now it's called National Academy of Medicine. They put out a report called To Err is Human, which is quite a famous report now. It really, I think, started the patient safety movement on a national level. There was certainly lots of discussion of patient safety prior to that, but this really kickstarted it and sort of changed the way the national conversation was going around where we needed to go with patient safety. For instance, one major issue that came out of To Err is Human was the need for accountability and measurement of progress, which we really didn't have. In 2000, we had very little information about quality, certainly, or safety. And so that really kickstarted it. Well, employers, like large companies that pay for health benefits for their employees, noticed this report. It was on the front page of the New York Times, that helped, but some of them were actually involved in it as well. And they were very concerned that after decades, really, of their attempt to manage their health benefits costs and get the best care for their employees, and to frankly feeling frustrated by it, after all of this effort, out comes a report that says, well, there's all these errors and accidents. 100,000 people are dying every year from preventable errors in hospitals. It was astonishing to employers, astonishing and frustrating, because they've been trying to manage health benefits in a responsible way, and this comes out of nowhere. For many employers, it was like, what is this? Are you kidding me? My people are just dying of preventable things. Right. So they formed Leapfrog out of that emotion, let's put it. And they said, why can't healthcare be held to the same standards that our products and services are held to? Our products and services, so for instance, automakers, who were among the strongest founders of Leapfrog, GM and Ford, they said, well, our products and services they're on newsstands compared against competitors on every detail. And consumers choose our products based on a great deal of information about our quality, our safety, as it compares to our competitors and our pricing. Our employees get none of that when they make a much more important decision, which is where to go for a hospital care. That's a pretty important decision. So they formed Leapfrog with a very fundamental premise. Let's publicly report how hospitals are doing on safety, and let's compare them against each other and make that available to the public and our employees for free. The way that they got the data was through Leapfrog, asking hospitals to voluntarily report to our survey, the Leapfrog Hospital Survey. So that was 25 years ago. At the time, people thought they were crazy. They said, "Oh, you can't monitor such things. Hospital safety is too complicated, blah, blah, blah." People won't understand all kinds of things. Well, fast forward 25 years, we're still doing it. 80% of hospital beds are represented in the Leapfrog survey voluntarily. And we have much more sophisticated measures thanks to all the measurement science that's been out there in 25 years. And we are able to assess safety and quality in a much more sophisticated way. We're not where we want to be. Lots more we want, but we definitely can do it. And we have mandatory reporting now through CMS of a number of safety measures, which allowed us to do the hospital safety grade, where we assign a letter grade to hospitals on how they're doing. But I'll add one thing about Leapfrog is that we've always been known for, on the survey in particular, but also part of the safety grade, is that we believe that adoption of technology is critically important. And we have always asked hospitals in the survey about their adoption of technology that's critical for patient safety. So that's why it's particularly nice to be here with you today and in your podcast, where you've talked a lot about this really important issue and really talk about how Leapfrog is perceiving the next 25 years as technology continues to be a critical part of patient safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that linkage is so, I don't know, on the surface, it sort of seems very obvious, right? That as we digitize, as things become more, electronic, that we should naturally be finding opportunities to move away from those sort of manual processes, those disconnected processes, and so on. I wonder if there's also a flip side of the coin. So one example that I know that I've heard talked about in the past is medication errors. And even with electronic systems in place, that didn't, necessarily stop medication errors. So understanding the obvious importance and connection between technology adoption and patient safety, give us some commentary on the flip side of the coin in terms of some of the limitations and some of the things that we've learned about technology in healthcare.
Well, I would say that it isn't so much a limitation as a reality about technology. And because healthcare has traditionally been behind other industries in the adoption of technology for a whole variety of reasons, which we probably have time to go into, but technology is not, it took healthcare a very long time to get, electronic medical records. In the 1980s, I was using my ATM card. I remember that's a long time ago. ATM card is advanced technology for where hospitals were 10 years ago. So, we're behind other industries. That said, when we started adopting, hospitals got really good at it and really moved very rapidly to adopt technology like EMRs. But one of the key aspects of adoption of major new technology and major new systems is that you have to continuously test it. It's not a one and done thing. And it's human nature to think, well, we're going to go live with Epic on such and such a date, and then we'll pop the champagne. We did it. And then a month later, people are complaining it's a mess and nobody's really ready maybe for what comes after. How do we keep it going? How do we keep making sure that it works for us? It isn't human nature to think in those long-term ways. I think we've come a long way, but I remember back when hospitals were first adopting technology that they weren't necessarily thinking of it that way. They just weren't thinking of it as a long-term endeavor. So what Leapfrog has done is in particular looked at, to your point, medication errors. They're the most common errors made in hospitals by far. There's various estimates. We actually don't have very good data yet on how often they happen in general, but estimates are as much as one error per inpatient per day. So that's a lot. You do those numbers, that's a lot of errors. Now, some of them are not major. Some of them might be just give someone a headache or make it hard to go to sleep, but some of them are major. So it is a very significant issue in hospitals. And the tool that we've asked hospitals about since day one with Leapfrog, so 25 years, is, do you use computerized prescriber order entry or physician order entry? Do you use a computerized system for that? Because those systems can alert physicians or other prescribers to common errors that can be made. And there's a lot of different errors that can be made, and it's amazing. As I've delved into this myself, I'm amazed at how easy it is to make an error with a medication. So does it alert to common errors? And when we first started doing it, it was like 1% of hospitals said, yeah, we're doing that. So now it's almost all hospitals are doing that, in part because of the federal initiatives. But then we now actually ask something else. We ask hospitals to test their system, and they need to do it every year. We offer them a free test on Leapfrog's survey, and we give them a set of dummy patients to enter into their EMR system, and then we give them a set of dummy orders, and they have a 2-hour time test. Tell us what happens when you enter these orders for these patients. Do you get the right alerts? And the right alerts can sometimes be no alert, because we don't want the systems to do frivolous alerts, alerts that really they shouldn't be doing, because then physicians will just automatically dismiss all the alerts because they get tired of seeing them all the time. So there's actually there's a science to that. So we test for that. But basically we're testing to see if their systems are going to alert them to these very significant errors that are tested in the CPOE test. And then we score them on it, and we publicly report how they did on the test. But that's been really part and parcel of what we've tried to do with hospitals in helping them along with this adoption of technology, which is to say, test it frequently. I wish they could test it more than once a year. We have capacity to help them with once a year. It should be more entities out there testing them. But once a year at least, be testing to see how your systems are doing in managing those medication errors. But that should be true for everything they do. They should be tested. They're ongoing. They should be monitored. We shouldn't assume that they're just going to always go the way we want them to go. If they're not plug and play.
It's really interesting. And I wonder how much, from your perspective, that process plays into that. So I have to imagine that Leapfrog has to be looking kind of at that intersection of people, process, technology, and sort of that three-legged stool in terms of how the ecosystem comes together to effectively reduce harm. Is that fair to say?
Well, we certainly are very concerned with that. People, process, we're very concerned with that. We do have a number of structural measures, both in the hospital safety grade and on our survey, that look at how you structure policies, you hardwire among your people and your culture the right thing to do, which, to your point, is as important as the technology itself. Because the technology isn't going to work if the people system isn't working.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to stay on the thread a little bit in terms of the EHR and sort of what we're seeing today, and then we'll kind of pivot into, I think, what we're going to see in the future. But one of the things that I'm curious of your perspective, decision support systems are ubiquitous and embedded in, most hospitals' EHRs at this point. I'm curious, is that another example of where we've seen technology systems that are truly useful at the point of care? Or is there even still, I'll say, sort of evolution that needs to happen in terms of what's kind of deployed out there in practice already today?
Well, decision support systems, that's what we're testing with that CPOE test. And we have not been overwhelmed by how well hospitals are doing. I mean, I think a lot of hospitals are kind of surprised that their decision support within their CPOE system doesn't work the way they thought it would. And so the test is useful to them. They always get better. Hospitals that do it the first time, they'll get better the next time. But basically, I mean, I think it's maybe one hospital in the entire country gets 100% of those orders correctly.
Wow.
And we're testing for really significant errors, like that would really cause harm to the patient and in some cases death. So it's really, we're not there yet, in other words, on just technology we've had around for 25 years. But decision support, as we look at AI and sort of new technologies that are out there and machine learning and things like that, I think we have the opportunity to do a lot better job with decision support and more nuanced job. I think decision support traditionally has been when there's very clear sort of logic models behind it, and they're very complicated sometimes, and so they take a lot of resources to develop and all those things. We think that with AI, very soon, But eventually, we will get to a point where that decision support can be helpful with even more complicated issues, like, for instance, diagnostic issues. Diagnostic errors is another major problem in patient safety. There's a lot more we could do with decision support with the help of AI and other kinds of new technology. So we haven't seen it play out that much, but we'd like to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we started, down the thread of AI, so let's kind of stay on it. And obviously we're talking about a digital healthcare podcast, so I think I'm contractually obligated to talk about AI in each episode. But with regard to AI, there's obviously just a tremendous amount of excitement about its potential in the world, and also obviously in terms of healthcare. So I'm curious, as you think about patient safety, certainly decision support, I think that's a great example in terms of diagnostics. Certainly, I think that we're seeing the world shift more towards personalized medicine as a result of some of these new, improvements with AI and so on. If you were to sort of think about the most promising ways that you see AI improving patient safety, where do you think some of those avenues might lie?
I would say the one that's most intriguing to me is its use with trigger tools in the EMR to alert clinicians before a problem occurs, or right after, when some interventions can be more effective than if it's too late. So, but really, trigger tools within the EMRs, I think, is extremely exciting. I know we haven't seen it fully implemented too much, but we are really looking. In fact, we are hosting a poster session on that at our annual meeting in December, and calling for posters if anyone wants to submit something, because we are really interested in finding out who is using the trigger tool technology. I think that could have a huge impact on patient safety if clinicians and others would get that kind of insight into where we predict the risk happening. And AI is capable of doing it, and the technology is there. So we know we can get there, but people have to get there. And that's where we're looking to see and hope that Leapfrog can help to foster it and help to promote it and get it moving, because it's very, very important technology. We've got to be able to get into those EMRs and really get the insight out of them that clinicians need and everybody needs to make hospitals safer and more effective. There's so much in the EMR.
Is it fair to say that, I guess from my perspective, it seems like AI is kind of the only way that you'd be able to sort of get to that point, because there is just now so much data that we collect on individual patients and populations as a whole. And there's so much information that today lives in an EHR. Is it reasonable to think that human beings can do it on their own, or is AI actually just like a prerequisite in terms of being able to make some of these strides in the future, I wonder?
Well, I'm not a technology expert, so I have to say I don't know for certain, but I would for sure know that AI is going to make it easier, better, and more effective and more efficient, for sure, than it currently is. I mean, right now, for instance, when a physician is seeing a patient, they have to look on the EMR and hope that they're getting on that first screenshot, that first page, all the information they need about that patient, because they usually don't have time to sift through the whole record to figure out what they need. They just need to have the key, elements right in front of them. But what AI can potentially do is a more nuanced approach. So the physician can be looking at highlights of the history that are relevant to the condition that the patient's coming in with and things like that. Can synthesize conversations that might have happened with the patient, with the nurse, for instance, instead of the nurse having to write all these extensive notes that the physician may or may not see right away. AI can synthesize that in real time. And so the physician's walking in, seeing for themselves quickly what the nurse learned, what the history is, blah, blah, and they can more efficiently and more effectively and faster be able to get to the root of the issue that's in front of them with the patient. So I think it can do it faster, better, more efficiently. Is it the only way? I don't know about that. Yep. And I think we've tried. And I think, I think some health systems have been better than others at getting there, but I do think it will definitely make it faster if we deploy it correctly. And there's lots of pitfalls of that, as you know.
Absolutely.
We have to have some guardrails, but for sure it can help.
I'm also interested, and you sort of alluded to this just a second ago as well. Transparency is obviously, I'll say from my perspective, a cornerstone of what Leapfrog brings to me as an employer, brings to me as a consumer. And I think transparency sometimes is hard to come by in healthcare. And you talked about it in terms of we might have been too late to prevent something bad happening to a patient from a safety perspective, but there might be opportunities to help stop it from happening the next time. So I'm curious, can you expound on that a little bit and give some more perspective to where you think technology and maybe AI specifically fit into that post-sentinel event kind of space and how we might be able to use the technology to improve with that reporting, transparency, education, all the things around making sure it never happens again?
Well, there was just a report that came out from the Office of the Inspector General for HHS, and it looked at reporting of sentinel events by hospitals and found that I believe it was like 15% of the time when OIG looked at the medical records or a random sample of them, they found about 15% of the time they weren't reported at all, and there was problems. What I hear from a lot of hospital leaders is that they are frustrated with sentinel events in general. Like, obviously, they're frustrated that they happen and nobody wants that to happen to patients, but also in the way that they're reported internally and the way that they hear about them. Sometimes they hear about like a whole lot of different events that are reported, some of which are really not sentinel events, but they have to kind of go through every single one of them. And it's just the sense that I get is that it's a lot of burden and not a lot of payoff. They don't feel like they're actually getting to the root cause of whatever is happening that is causing this flurry of events. And some of them, as a result, are hesitant to adopt new technologies like AI technologies because they feel like it's going to be even more sentinel events or so-called sentinel events being reported to them that they have to deal with, and a flurry of more of that. And without the payoff that they want. The payoff that they want is to learn what's going wrong and how do we fix it. So my sense is AI can help with that, to synthesize through what's really happening. And I think that's good. But we're also going to need to have I think, rethinking of both the payment system and regulatory reform so that we can make it clear that this needs to be a priority. Because I think hospitals are capable of solving this issue. I mean, you certainly don't want a physician spending, 24/7 reading through reports that come from AI or something. That's not what we're looking for. But we do want them to think it's really important that they get to the bottom of all of the most important events that are happening and figure out how do we fix this systemic issue that's causing these events or whatever it is, that they solve these problems in real time right away. And that they see that as the top priority on their day's list. That is a top priority. Fix these problems so they don't happen to other patients. So I don't think we've conveyed that through the payment system. I don't think we've conveyed that through CMS and regulatory reform. And I think we do need to convey it. I think we need to say we're holding you accountable for it. So there is payoff. When you focus on your sentinel events and looking at them and really solving the root of the problem, you will see results. You'll see results in terms of your payment, in terms of your other kinds of rewards in the community, in terms of your public image, which matters. All of those things matter to anyone who works in any industry, really. But if you work in healthcare, it matters. And you deserve to have that feedback from the public, both positive and critical, when things are going right and things are going wrong. And that's something we just don't traditionally have in healthcare, and it's been a huge problem. So if we can improve the way hospitals are getting feedback and accountability for these sentinel events, then I think we will have more of an impetus for leaders in healthcare to deploy AI to make that an easier, more efficient way for them of discovering where the root of the problem is.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And you bring in, sort of another player in this whole space in terms of the federal government. And obviously, there are kind of puts and takes and differences from one administration to the next and so on and so forth. And obviously, there's been some recent legislation that, may change elements of, payments and insureds and so on and so forth. But one of the things I've been so impressed about, my interaction with Leapfrog is how well you and your team can synthesize sort of the information from the federal government and relating it back to kind of the real world that we all live in. So I'm really curious about kind of your perspective on where those changes may come from. So for example, like as you refer to payments, is that referring more towards like the ACO model where it was pay for quality, pay for performance? Give me some examples of where the federal government could play a role in this to bring more of a focus to safety across the ecosystem of healthcare.
I think that there's a couple of things. I actually think CMS has moved really far in the past decade, a lot farther than I think anyone anticipated. They have a long way to go, but they're definitely on the right track. And I think they seem to have some bold leadership that wants to move them in that direction right now. So ACOs are a good example, or just in general value-based models of care.
Right.
What we don't see with value-based purchasing right now is downside risk for providers, physician practices or hospitals. We see it a little, so I shouldn't say it's never there, but I've been kind of surprised that even the models that have been tested through CMMI and CMS really don't result in or Medicare Advantage, actually, they don't result in a lot of downside risk. So hospitals don't, or the physician practices don't feel like they're going to lose something if this thing doesn't work out. So it becomes almost like fee for service, which is where we want to get away from.
Right.
So I think that we need to see more downside risk. We need to see more risk shifting to providers themselves. That is very difficult for providers to deal with, and it's very difficult for anyone to do because it's a whole other set of metrics that they have to, and it's really a different way of doing business that's needed in order to manage to risk. It's just different. And there hasn't been enough impetus for providers to get there, but we want them to get there because what we want them to be working toward is the best outcomes for the patient. I mean, that's what everybody wants. And we don't want fee for service. It shouldn't be about managing to the services that you provide. It's managing to the people that you serve. That's what we want them to be doing. And then we have to have tougher payment models to do that. So we've tried some, but we have not had the downside risk that's needed, and that needs to change. That's true for CMS. It's also true for employers and purchasers who spend about a third of the dollars spent in healthcare right now, and whose commercially insured populations pay a lot more per capita for their healthcare than those covered by Medicare or Medicaid.
Right.
So it's a very significant investment, and population are among those employers who are buying healthcare for their employees. That's as well a group that needs to be thought about and needs to be given more tools and more, I think, supports to get where they need to be in structuring those kinds of value arrangements also. And they want to, but for a variety of reasons in the marketplace, it's extremely difficult for them to do it individually as employers, but it needs to be done.
It's really interesting. I mean, it seems like everybody is kind of aligned, right, in terms of what the end game is. I mean, physicians obviously want patients to be healthy and safe, kind of rule number one, right? Do no harm. Certainly employers want their employees, as you've referenced a couple of times, to be healthy and safe and so on. And the insurance companies theoretically don't want to be, paying, payouts for errors or when things go wrong and so on. How do we just because it seems like if everybody's aligned to the objective, what has to happen to bring it all together?
So, we need to follow the money.
Right.
I think that's the first thing. And some people will lose money if we switch from fee for service.
That's fair.
And, we just have to be honest about that. And the people who lose money, they may not say it out loud. Oh, I'm going to lose money, so don't do that thing that would clearly benefit the patient. They're not going to say that. They don't want to say that. But it's underneath the hood of some of this engine of change that we're all trying to drive. So there's that. I think there's also, like you just mentioned, payers or so-called payers, health plans. Health plans are an interesting player in the healthcare system. When I hear that health plans are paying for this care or that care, I hear in my head purchasers that I work with, these are like companies that are buying healthcare, that say they're not paying for the care, I am. So when Walmart is buying healthcare for their employees, they are buying healthcare. They pay for that healthcare. They're self-insured. These are not insurance arrangements like your homeowner's insurance. That's not what it is. They're paying for the care through various health plans, but they're paying for it. And so it's not the health plan. It's those companies that are paying for this care. And so, but that creates a problem in the market. Because what exactly is the incentive that health plans have? It sort of, for their clients, they have one set of incentives, and then for the providers, they have a different set of incentives, and it just can get very confused. And so it's very important for us to be very clear. Here's what patients want. Here's what consumers want. Here's what purchasers want. And how do we get there? And then sort of clear out some of the obscuring forces in the marketplace. And they're not doing it deliberately. It just is, because it's a complicated market. But we need to kind of be laser focused on what's best for the patient. And when we do that, suddenly things get clearer. And that, at least, is what Leapfrog's about, is clearing out all that stuff and saying, here's what's best for the patient. Let's hold the healthcare system accountable for delivering that.
I think it's really fascinating. I think that's such a great summary of where we're at. I've got one more for you. I'm curious about where you see Leapfrog going in the next couple of years and what you see on the horizon. Obviously, certainly, we talked a little bit about what you're interested in, from an AI perspective and a technology perspective. But I guess a little bit more broadly, to kind of pull up to another level, if you think about Leapfrog's objectives over the coming years, what are some things that you're hoping to accomplish, to achieve, to see? I guess I'll leave it open-ended and let you go where you want with that.
Well, we are going to continue our path on promoting the use of technology for improving patient safety. I think there's a lot of interest for AI for a whole variety of business reasons within a healthcare system. We want to make sure patient safety is on the top of that list. And also, we want to make sure that in fact, we're nurturing that marketplace, that we're creating lots of incentives in the market to invest in that technology. That's really what we're focused heavily on. And we want to create a roadmap for hospitals to do that. So we're really working closely with folks like IHI and others in the ecosphere of healthcare to really understand how AI can best be deployed, what are the breakthroughs, what are the new things, and what are the best practices for getting there. So as that knowledge accumulates, we're going to be right in front of it. We're going to hope to convey that as quickly as possible as we learn to hospitals, and then hold them accountable for best practices as they come along. So as they're, agreed to by the experts. So stay tuned on that. We're moving very quickly on that issue, and feel strongly that that's the next generation, and it's got to happen fast, because patient safety is not where it should be, and it's got to improve. The other thing we're working on is we're working on specific populations and understanding how their safety is protected when they're in the hospital. So, and one that we've worked with extensively now are people who are living with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2.
Right.
And we have been working with the American Diabetes Association on a really exciting program that I love personally, which is called the Recognized Leaders in Caring for People Living with Diabetes. It's a Recognized Leaders program where we award a certificate to certain hospitals if they've shown that they're protecting all of their patients who are living with diabetes. And what I learned through doing this is that a third of inpatients are estimated to have diabetes or prediabetes.
Wow.
Third, a huge percentage. So this is really important that they have special needs to protect them for patient safety, to prevent their need for amputation and things like that. There are very specific and very sensitive needs on a 24/7 basis when they're in the hospital. So we are now awarding this, both ADA and Leapfrog, awarding this Recognized Leaders certificate to hospitals that have achieved it. We had, I think it was 36 hospitals were awarded last year, and there's an application open if hospitals want to take a look at it. It's really complying with guidelines that have been out there from ADA for quite a long time, and I really encourage hospitals to take a look. If they apply and they don't get it this year, apply next year, because this is something that is really important to get it right, and it's doable. There's a set of guidelines, just follow them and get it done, because a third of your patients are at risk. So I hope that hospitals will really take us up on that one. And then we have our annual meeting, which I should mention, December 15th. It's at the Gaylord National Harbor, just outside of DC, which is a great location in December, by the way. Bring your kids if you want to take a few days there. They have a lot going on in the Christmas season around there. And then and that will have that poster session that I mentioned, which I encourage people really looking at hospitals or health systems and ASCs that have done innovative things to try to achieve the quality standards that Leapfrog has set forward in our survey. And in addition, as part of that, we will have particular section on automated trigger tool use for preventing adverse events. So please take a look at our website, which is leapfroggroup.org, and all of the information if people want to submit those applications. So strongly encourage engagement around that. But we're full speed ahead on that technology adoption. So I hope everyone's got their seatbelt on.
It's fantastic. I can't wait for the meeting in December. I'm very much looking forward to it. I thank you so much, Leah, for being with us today. And even more than that, thank you so much for the work that Leapfrog is doing. Taylor obviously has been a partnership advisory council member, a PAC member now just for the past few months. And it's been wonderful being able to interact with you and other constituents around Leapfrog. It's been wonderfully educational. It's been fantastic.
We very much value Taylor's involvement, and we're very excited when you joined. So that has already been very helpful to us. So thank you for being part of it.
It really is our pleasure. And it was such a pleasure again to have you on. Thank you so much again, Leah, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you also to our listeners. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep growing the show. And if you'd like to learn a little more about Taylor Healthcare and the digital healthcare experience, you can go to taylor.com/digital-healthcare. That's our show for today. And until next time, this is Chris Civitarice wishing you health and good cheer. Take care.
To learn more about Taylor Healthcare, please visit taylor.com/digital-healthcare. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice or services. The Digital Healthcare Experience is produced by Naomi Schwimmer. Podcast music by Nicholas Bach.
Informed consent is vital to patient care, but how can you help patients make informed decisions? Introducing iMed Health from Taylor Healthcare, digital tools that standardize and simplify the informed consent process. Go to imedhealth.com to learn more. Find the link in the show notes.